I'm Savannah Blake, 40 years old, founder and CEO of Clarion Systems, a supply chain technology company valued at over $180 million. I built this company with my own two hands, starting in a tiny rented apartment on the east side of Denver, where the dining table was my desk and the bedroom was stacked with cardboard boxes and computer parts. But today, I'm not here to tell you a business success story. I want to share something that made me face a truth I'd been avoiding for 4 decades. When you're born into a family that only sees value in sons, being a daughter means working 3 times harder just to be seen. And sometimes, you're still invisible. I'm the second of 2 children, born and raised in a northern suburb of Oklahoma City. My older brother, Mason, is 2 years ahead of me. Once the captain of the high school football team, the coach's favorite, and the golden boy of my parents. And me? I loved math, took apart computers for fun, and spent my free time teaching myself programming on a beat-up old laptop I got from a repair shop. Every summer, my dad, Charles, would take Mason camping and fishing, calling it real men's time. I always asked to go. The answer never changed. Girls, stay home with their mothers. Don't meddle in men's things. As a child, I didn't understand. All I knew was that every family gathering, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, revolved around Mason's latest accomplishments, grades, wins, even his frat parties in college. And me? I was mentioned in passing, like the girl who's good with computers. Smart, but not enough to matter. I never blamed them back then. I believed maybe if I worked harder, achieved more, made myself undeniable, they'd finally see me. So I did the thing no one expected. I earned a full ride to Caltech, graduated with honors, and spent 7 years working at a tech startup in Seattle. But no matter how many emails I sent home about my milestones, no matter how many visits I made with hopeful stories, the dinner table conversation always went like this. Mason was just promoted to vice president. Mason's building a new house, nearly 4,000 square feet. Mason says his daughter's great at math, just like Aunt Savannah. Just like Aunt Savannah. Yet I was never invited to speak at her graduation. 33, I gave up a 6-figure salary and launched Clarion Systems. No seed funding from family, no network. Just a detailed plan, $60,000 in savings, and a mountain of doubt from the people I loved most. You sure about this? No woman-led firm in that space ever lasts, my mother, Linda, said when I shared my vision. When I later told her Clarion had signed a software deal worth over $12 million with a major logistics group in Texas, she had one response. Mason just bought a brand new steel gray Ford F-100. It looks amazing. I had grown used to it. I thought I had learned to live with it, but I was wrong. Everything started to shift the day I got Mason's wedding invitation. To a woman named Natalie Cross, daughter of the chairman of Crosspoint Logistics, one of my largest clients. I didn't know then that a $24 million contract between Clarion and Crosspoint would become the spark that ignited the deepest conflict of my life. And it all began with something seemingly small. My seating assignment at the wedding. I never thought I'd cry over a $5,000 order, but I did. That was our very first deal, with a small agricultural parts distributor in Kansas. No one knew the name Clarion Systems back then, except me and 2 freshly graduated engineers I convinced to join with promises and ramen noodles. We worked 14-hour days, sleeping in shifts on a folding chair in what was really just a studio apartment I rented cheap because the heater was broken. Winters in Denver were brutal. I used to code, wrapped in blankets like a cocoon, but I never complained. I didn't have time to be scared or doubt myself. I knew if I went down, Clarion went with me, and no one was coming to save me. For 3 years, not a single investment came in. I pitched at conferences, sent hundreds of demo emails that went unanswered. Some days, I had to choose between paying the power bill or keeping our website hosting active. My boyfriend at the time, a former finance exec, suggested I pause the dream and find a more stable job. I broke up with him on a snowy February morning. That very day I got word Clarion Systems had been selected to pitch at the Salt Lake City Supply Chain Tech Summit. Just 15 minutes, but our first real shot. I borrowed a blazer from a friend, stood on stage, shaking from nerves and cold, but I spoke like I was addressing the whole country. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 7:12 a.m. A calm female voice. Hi, Ms. Blake. This is Rita Ellington, COO of Ellington Properties. We're seeking a supply chain solution for over 200 real estate projects. I'd like to learn more about Clarion Systems. I almost dropped the phone. Ellington Properties was one of the largest real estate developers in the Southwest, headquartered in Arizona, with over 12,000 employees nationwide. We started with a Zoom call, then 3 months of security audits, 6 rounds of software adjustments, and 2 live pilots. I didn't celebrate too soon. I knew things could fall apart over the tiniest bug. But on September 3rd last year, at 5:03 p.m., I received an email titled, Clarion Systems, Contract Approval, $24.50 MUSD. I don't remember how many times I screamed. My team cried on the spot. I sat down, stared at the screen, and didn't shed a single tear. Only one overwhelming feeling: validated. I called my mom to share the news. Oh, that's nice. Did you know Mason's giving a speech at the Rotary Club tonight? The whole town's coming to watch. I laughed. Not bitterly this time. Because now, I knew, some recognition matters more than a family's nod. The irony? I had no idea Ellington Properties had ties to Natalie's family. Rita Ellington was Natalie's cousin. They didn't know I was Mason's sister until after the deal was signed. Everything was based on merit, not last names. I only found out a week before the wedding. Natalie hosted an intimate dinner with extended family, and when she heard Savannah Blake, she paused, forced a smile. Oh, you're the one behind Clarion? You're working with Ellington Properties? I nodded, not realizing I'd just bruised the bride's ego. 3 days later, I received the formal wedding invite. My name, +1. I decided to attend. Not for the family. For me. It was one of the rare times I could walk into a family event not as the tech-savvy little sister, but as a CEO. I wore a sapphire V-neck dress, simple but striking. Joining me was Ethan Harper, a strategic investor who had believed in and backed Clarion after following my journey from the beginning. You sure you want me there? Ethan asked. I don't want to be the sore thumb at your family's party. I just smiled. That thorn is worth $24.5 million, and I think it's time they know I don't sit at the kids' table anymore. I had no idea what was waiting for me at that wedding, but I had a feeling this wasn't just another family gathering. It would be the place that redefined everything I'd ever hoped to receive from them. I've spoken at global tech galas, stood behind podiums at international conferences, shaken hands with people 10 times more powerful than my father. But no event has ever made my heart pound like my own brother's wedding. Not because I looked forward to the party, but because a part of me, despite all the disappointment, still held on to hope for recognition, even just once. I prepared carefully, not to impress Mason or Natalie, but to remind myself that I deserve to belong anywhere I walk into. That sapphire blue dress wasn't just an outfit, it was a statement. And Ethan, the man beside me, wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the one who'd witnessed me build Clarion from the ground up and stayed through every storm. We arrived at the wedding venue, a luxury lakeside resort on Lake Tahoe, where the deep blue sky reflected off the still waters and pine-covered hills stretched all the way to the horizon. The parking lot was full, mostly Mercedes, Range Rovers, and a few oversized Bentleys. I caught a glimpse of my mother, Linda, in a pale pink dress, giving instructions to the decor team. Hi, Mom, I called out as I approached. She turned, her eyes flicking past me and landing on Ethan, a polite nod. Hello, sweetie. Oh, and this is Ethan Harper, Ethan said, reaching out with a handshake. Nice to meet you, ma'am. Yes, thanks for coming, she replied, then looked at me. Did you bring flats? The ceremony's outside, soft grass. That was it. No questions about work, no mention of the big contract, no acknowledgement that I'd just been featured in last month's issue of Tech Executives Weekly. But her silence didn't shake my confidence anymore. We walked through the reception area. Rows of white wooden chairs faced the lake, with a massive floral arch of white orchids and tulips at the center. Simple, expensive, and very on-brand for Natalie. I spotted my father, Charles, deep in conversation with Richard Ellington, the bride's father and chairman of the board at Ellington Properties. He was also the man who signed the deal with Clarion. "Savannah!" Richard lit up when he saw me. "I was just telling Charles about your new system. Truly impressive." "Great to see you again, Richard," I smiled, shaking his hand. My father's expression faltered. He looked like he wanted to say something, but Richard spoke first. "You know, ever since implementing Clarion software, our operations team has cut internal shipping costs by more than 18%. Those numbers speak for themselves." I nodded politely while watching my father's face, awkward, sheepish, like he was just now realizing his daughter might be worth more than a seat at the dinner table. "And yet," Richard raised a brow, "Mason never mentioned that his sister founded Clarion. Quite the surprise." I didn't respond, because I knew it wasn't a surprise, it was a choice. Mason had deliberately kept that to himself. In his mind, I'd always be the tech-savvy little sister. The ceremony took place under soft golden sunlight. Natalie walked out in a crystal-embellished white gown, gliding beside her father. A live pianist played in the background. I wanted to feel something, but my heart was cooling fast. Not because of the ceremony, but because I knew things were about to go very differently than I imagined. After the ceremony, guests were directed to the main reception, a glass pavilion outfitted with long tables draped in lace, crystal glasses, gold-trimmed chairs, every detail meticulously arranged. I stepped up to the guest list station and scanned for my name. "Savannah Blake, +1. The young hostess flipped through her list. "Yes, table number, one moment." The hesitation in her eyes made me straighten up. "Is there a problem?" Ethan asked gently but firmly. "Ah, Ms. Savannah Blake and guest are assigned to the event support table near the west hallway, by the main service area?" I didn't immediately understand. "You mean I'm seated with the operations crew?" "Yes, ma'am." There were some last-minute changes. Limited space at the main tables for non-primary partners. I froze. What did I just hear? Non-primary partners? Me, the one managing a software system worth nearly $25 million for the bride's own family company. "I'm the CEO of Clarion Systems," I said slowly. "The company that just signed with Ellington Properties. Your bride's organization." The hostess flushed. I'm just going by what the coordinator provided." Before I could say anything else, a familiar voice rang behind me. "Oh, Savannah, you made it!" Natalie approached, eyes sparkling but tone frosty. "Hope you don't mind the seating arrangement. We had to prioritize family and key relationships. I'm sure you understand, right?" I smiled. But my chest turned to ice. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just being overlooked as a little sister. I was being minimized because they couldn't stand that I had surpassed them. I can't remember the last time I was treated like a temp staffer at an event. Maybe. Never. But tonight, at my own brother's wedding, I, the CEO running logistics systems for the bride's family empire, was placed outside the main hall at a fold-out round table tucked into the catering area, right next to the hot trays. Fluorescent light from the kitchen spilled out, food smells filled the air, clattering silverware echoed, and there I sat, on a plastic folding chair draped with a white cloth for appearances. Ethan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure this is just a mistake?" he asked, voice tense with anger. I wanted to believe it was, but Natalie's eyes moments ago, the way she called me a non-primary relationship, said everything. We sat down, only to avoid standing awkwardly. But as a staff member walked by, He paused, glanced at me, and asked, "Hey, are you new? We've got some extra part-timers helping clear the side dishes tonight." I gripped the glass of water in my hand. Ethan couldn't hold it in any longer. "She doesn't work here. She's Savannah Blake." The waiter flinched. "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought—" He trailed off, glancing toward the kitchen corner, where two staff members were clearly whispering and watching us. One of them, an event coordinator, quickly turned away when our eyes met. I stood up abruptly. "Where are you going?" Ethan asked. "Restroom." "5 minutes." I walked briskly down the hallway, my chest burning. It wasn't about the seat. It was the humiliation. Intentional, calculated, and approved by someone I shared blood with. I entered the women's restroom near the staff lounge. I locked myself in a stall, leaned back against the wall, and gasped for breath like I'd just run a marathon. My mind spun with questions, but one rose louder than the rest. Mason knew. He let this happen. I replayed the call from the night before, when I had congratulated him and quietly asked about the seating arrangements. He brushed it off. "There were a few last-minute changes, but don't worry, you'll still be there." Still be there, but not in a place that mattered. Worse yet, my parents said nothing. No one stepped in. Not even a question. I pulled out my phone. A message from Ethan popped up at the top. "I'm waiting by the hallway. Take your time. Breathe. I've got you." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then I opened my contacts and dialed Joan Maxwell, Clarion's head of legal. I only needed one sentence. "Joan, prep the documents. We're activating the termination clause with Ellington Properties." Joan paused. "Savannah, what happened?" "I'll explain later. But we don't do business with people who treat partners the way they just treated me." "Got it. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. I ended the call and stepped out of the restroom with a decision crystal clear in my mind. No second guessing, no hesitation. In the hallway, Ethan was waiting. When he saw my eyes, he knew. I didn't need advice. I needed action. We walked back to the reception tent. I didn't head to the guest tables. I walked straight to the VIP table, where my parents, Mason, Natalie, and Richard Ellington, were seated alongside a few sharply dressed men, likely high-profile partners. I got close enough that they had no choice but to look up. Natalie blinked in surprise. "Oh, Savannah, looking for another drink?" I smiled softly, a smile sharp as glass. "No, I just came over to inform you. Clarion Systems is officially terminating the contract with Ellington Properties. It seems we're not aligned on core values. We don't partner with organizations that practice discrimination, whether in boardrooms or banquet halls." The air froze. Richard Ellington leaned forward. "Wait a moment. Savannah, what's going on here?" "What's going on?" I turned to Mason. "Did you tell Natalie to do it, or did you just nod and let it happen?" Mason stammered. Natalie turned pale. My father frowned, about to speak. But I cut in. "I don't need explanations. I just need to free myself from this manufactured ecosystem. Enjoy the wedding. Don't mind me." I turned, took Ethan's hand, and walked out of the tent like I was the one hosting the whole event. Behind me, murmurs began. And I knew, tonight, they'd stop calling me the tech-savvy little sister. Tonight. They'd remember my name. I never imagined I'd one day stand in a luxury wedding, surrounded by people in tuxedos and silk gowns holding champagne flutes, just to announce the cancellation of a nearly $25 million deal. But I did it, and I had never felt more at peace. As we walked away from the stunned expressions at the head table, Ethan and I stepped outside into the silver-lit dusk over Lake Tahoe. The wind was cool, clean, just like the decision I'd made. "You just triggered a full-on earthquake," Ethan murmured. Not judging, just in awe. "I know, and every second was worth it." I pulled out my phone and dialed Greg Masterson, Clarion's COO and the person I trusted most on the executive team. "Savannah?" Greg answered immediately. "I'm in a meeting with the tech leads. What's wrong?" I need you to begin the contract termination process with Ellington Properties, effective immediately. A pause. Not of surprise. Greg knew me well enough to understand. If I said this, I had my reasons. Is this personal or strategic? Both, I said plainly. As of today, Clarion won't work with any organization that doesn't understand or respect the human value behind our technology. Greg took a breath. Understood. I'll have legal draft the notice and reach out to Ellington's team. Do you want to go public internally yet? Not yet. I'll be back in the office tomorrow morning and meet with the team. Right now, I need to get out of here. I ended the call. No hesitation, no shaking hands. In the distance, I spotted Richard Ellington stepping out of the main tent, his face tense, scanning the area like a CEO who'd just been blindsided on his own turf. Behind him trailed Natalie, her wedding dress billowing in the breeze, and Mason, pale as if he'd never been told no in his life. I knew they were coming. Ethan turned to me. You ready for this? More than ever. The three of them stopped a few steps away. Savannah, Richard spoke first, his voice still trying to maintain its politeness. I think we need to handle this more professionally. This is a wedding, not a place for announcements. You're right, I replied calmly. But it's exactly how I was treated at this wedding that exposed how people like me are viewed as partners. Natalie cut in, her voice shaky with anger. You're sabotaging Mason's career. Do you have any idea how long he's worked to get a spot on that Ellington project? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm simply withdrawing the value none of you appreciated in the first place. Mason didn't know about this, she tried to defend. Really? I turned to Mason. You knew I was seated by the kitchen. You allowed me to be made a joke at your own wedding, and when everyone at the head table discussed Clarion software, you still let them think I was just your sister, who's good with computers? Mason was speechless. Richard lowered his voice, attempting to salvage the situation. Ms. Blake? I admit there were some issues with the seating arrangements, but you should reconsider. Canceling the contract now will impact the rollout of our entire operations system. I crossed my arms, chin lifted. Mr. Richard, if canceling a contract disrupts your whole operation, that only proves how critical Clarion is. But if you still see me as just Mason's sister, then I can't trust you to honor serious terms in the future. Natalie turned away, visibly annoyed. Mason stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You really did this. I already did, Mason. I've silently swallowed every skipped dinner, every moment of being overlooked, every pitiful glance for daring to dream differently. But tonight, I chose to stand up for myself. A wave of murmur started to ripple across the guest crowd. News was spreading fast. Some had already pulled out their phones. Richard exhaled sharply. Natalie stormed off, her heels stabbing into the soft grass as if trying to punish the ground. Mason stayed put. You realize how furious Mom and Dad are going to be? I looked at him, not with anger, not with bitterness, just pity for someone who'd never had to fight to be valued. Let them be angry. I didn't come here for approval. I came to remind everyone that I deserve to be treated like a real human being, not a shadow in this family tree. And with that, I walked away, head held high, heels steady on the soft lawn. For the first time in my life, I didn't need a seat at their table to know I was worthy of building my own. Just a few minutes after I left Richard Ellington, Mason, and the wedding still reeling, I started to feel the true weight of the decision I had just made, and the ripple effect was spreading faster than I expected. Before I could even reach the parking lot, my phone buzzed nonstop. The first message was from Greg. We've sent the termination notice to Ellington Properties' legal team, and, Savannah, you should know, word is spreading fast. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Next came a text from Chloe Alvarez, COO of Monarch Logistics, a leading transport corporation in Texas that Clarion once tried to pitch, only to be turned down. Heard you just gave Ellington a lesson how to treat partners. When are you free to talk about working together? We may have misjudged Clarion. I stared at the screen, stunned by how quickly things were moving. A single act of self-respect had set off a chain reaction in the business world. By the time we reached the car lot, two men were already waiting, clearly not just regular guests. They stepped forward as I unlocked my Tesla. "Excuse me, Ms. Blake? I'm Russell Byrne from Crownstone Development. I was at the wedding tonight. We heard about your decision. Mind if we exchange cards?" "I'm Lyle Jennings, Director of Investments at North Point Capital. Your company is doing incredible things in this space. If you're not exclusively tied up yet, I'd love to explore some opportunities." Ethan looked at me, visibly surprised. As for me, I tried to keep my composure, even though a tidal wave was building inside. "Thank you, both. I appreciate the interest. But tonight isn't the right time to talk business," I said politely. "My assistant will set something up. I'm available next week." We exchanged business cards. They nodded, not pushing, but it was clear every eye in the industry would be on Clarion after tonight. I had just stepped into the car when a voice called out from behind. "Savannah, hold up." I rolled down the window. It was my father, Charles Blake, hurrying across the parking lot, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "What do you think you're doing? You've driven Richard Allerton up the wall. Mason nearly collapsed. And now investors are calling me asking what the hell is going on." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. "All this over? A seat?" he nearly shouted. "You did all this to prove what?" "It's not about a seat, Dad," I replied, my voice steady and low. "It's about a lifetime of being dismissed. Today was just the final drop, and it seems that one drop overflowed the whole basin, including the investors. Richard's gonna pull the entire project. Mason will lose his chance to become a strategic partner. What you did was cruel to your family." I looked up at him, my eyes no longer shattered but sharp and clear. "I'm not a bargaining chip for this family to trade my worth. If it comes down to pleasing my family or preserving my dignity, I'll choose the latter every time." He started to say something, but then he fell silent. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. He simply turned away, his posture smaller, disappearing into the shadows of the parking lot. Ethan gently squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "Never better," I said, and I meant it. It felt like I had just taken off a heavy cloak that had been clinging to me since childhood. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. They could keep their banquet table. I'd build an entire ballroom of my own. The next morning, when I walked into Clarion's office, the entire atmosphere had shifted. My team stood as I entered, not just out of manners, but out of genuine respect. News of Clarion canceling the contract with Ellington had already spread beyond our walls, but what people were talking about even more was the reason behind it. A female CEO, setting boundaries, choosing dignity over dollars, wasn't just rare, it was revolutionary. On my desk was a bouquet with a handwritten card. "I don't know everything you've been through, but I do know this. Yesterday, you changed the way I view leadership." Chloe Alvarez, Monarch Logistics. I smiled, setting the card aside gently. And all I could think was, this is just the beginning. I knew the call would come. I just didn't expect it so soon. 7:02 a.m. before I'd even finished my first sip of coffee. The screen lit up with a name I'd gotten used to seeing but never hoped for. Mom. Linda Blake. I let it ring once, then twice. By the third ring, I picked up, because I knew if I didn't face them, they'd assume I was hiding. And this time, I wouldn't hide. "Hello?" I said, trying to stay calm. "Savannah?" My mother's voice cut through like a January wind in Montana. "I can't believe you had the nerve to do that. You ruined Mason's wedding! Do you know? Richard Ellington is threatening to pull all his investment funding. I've had to listen to endless criticism from both sides of the family." I stayed silent, let her unleash it all. I'd been waiting for this conversation my whole life. "And what do you have to say for yourself?" she snapped. Did you ever think about the consequences? Mason's lost his role in the new project. Richard's backing out. Our family's now the talk of the whole city council. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then spoke steady, clear. Mom, I didn't ruin anything. I just refused to be treated like I was invisible in the middle of a family celebration. Over a seat? You walked away from millions of dollars over something that petty? I let out a laugh, not amused, bitter. Petty? Then let's rewind. Bro, when I was valedictorian in high school, no one came because Mason sprained his wrist during football practice. The day I got my acceptance letter from MIT, you sent a text that said, "Good job," and never called. When I graduated with honors, you and Dad showed up 45 minutes late because Mason had an interview at a new gym. When I landed my first client, I called home, and Dad said, "Are you eating okay?" And the most recent one, when Clarion won a National Innovation Award, you posted a photo of Mason on a construction site and wrote, "Proud of my son, the one creating real value." Silence on the other end. I continued, my voice unwavering. "And you still call that petty?" "Savannah, you're always so sensitive. I don't hate you, but Mason is the one who carries on the family legacy." "And what am I, the shadow behind that legacy?" I cut in, voice sharp. "Have you ever asked what I really wanted, or were you just happy that I stayed quiet, successful enough to avoid causing trouble?" I heard a heavy sigh on the line. Then, suddenly, my father's voice joined in, without warning. "You're being selfish, Savannah. Do you even understand how much Mason has sacrificed for this family? All those years he spent learning to lead, to take on responsibility?" I chuckled lightly. Learned to lead? By letting his sister sit next to the kitchen at his wedding while bragging to guests about software he couldn't write a single line of. No one said a word. I spoke slowly. "I'm not sorry for walking away, and I'm definitely not sorry for choosing myself over being a side character in someone else's story." "You're arrogant," my father muttered. "No. I have just enough self-respect," I replied. "I'm tired of shrinking myself so this family can stay comfortable. And if standing up for myself means being seen as a traitor, then I accept that." No one said a word. I ended it on my terms. "If you truly want to understand me, then listen, not to respond, but to realize. I've changed, and I'm not going back." I hung up. My hand was still clenched, but my heart felt lighter, like I had finally dropped a backpack of bricks I'd carried for years. Ethan, who had listened to the entire call, stepped closer without a word. He just held me, saying nothing, needing nothing. I leaned against him, eyes on the soft morning sky over Denver. For the first time, I no longer yearned for praise, approval, or a warm look from my parents, because I finally understood. Recognition means nothing if you have to give up your dignity to earn it. 3 days after that historic wedding, Clarion Systems felt like Wall Street on IPO day. Phones rang nonstop. My inbox overflowed with partnership requests, investment offers, and apologies from firms that had once dismissed me. "Ms. Savannah, Chloe Alvarez from Monarch Logistics is in conference room 3. She's ready to go over the 5-year contract," my assistant Sarah reported, just as Greg, the COO, walked in, barely able to hide his excitement. "We just got an email from Titan Maritime," Greg said. "They want Clarion to rebuild the entire supply chain for the Port of Seattle. They said they need a company that stands for human values, not just tech." I nodded, smiling faintly. "Right decision at the right time can trigger a chain reaction," I said, and I was watching it unfold. No one called the Ellington cancellation a loss anymore. Industry headlines called it the boldest and most valuable pushback of the year. Women in Tech Weekly even ran the headline. CEO Savannah Blake, from wedding kitchen table to million-dollar negotiation. That evening, fresh out of the shower, hair damp, I stood by my bookshelf choosing between 2 novels when the landline rang. An unfamiliar number with a Wisconsin area code. I rarely answered that phone, but something nudged me to pick up. Hello, Savannah? I froze. And Aunt Margaret? It's me, sweetheart. Can't believe it took a chaotic wedding for me to hear your voice again. Aunt Margaret, my father's younger sister, was the only one who ever called me sweetheart with real tenderness. She had once been the chief architect at a major East Coast construction firm. But after a family inheritance dispute, she was cast out and had no contact with us for over 15 years. Since then, she'd only been mentioned as a family embarrassment. I've been following Clarion for a while now, but today I called because I saw you stand up, not for applause, but for yourself. And I think it's time you knew you're not alone. I sank into my chair. That voice, thought to be long gone, made me feel like I was 6 years old again, doodling in her sketchbook. Aren't you angry with them? I asked, voice trembling. Angry? I used to hurt, but not anymore. Because they'll never change, Savannah. But women like me, like you, we get to choose not to stay silent anymore. She said she was coming to Denver next week, bringing old blueprints and untold stories. And before hanging up, she said something I'll never forget. You sat in the chair they all thought you'd never touch, and you didn't just sit, you held up a mirror so they could see themselves. That night, Ethan and I walked through the park near home. Not much talking, just quiet, rhythmic steps in the cool May breeze. But under the old maple tree by the lake, Ethan suddenly took my hand, turned to face me, and looked into my eyes. Savannah, he said softly, for 3 years, I've wondered if I fell in love with a brilliant woman or a resilient one. I smiled. And do you have an answer now? I was wrong, he said, eyes glowing. I love both. And now, there's a third. The woman who no longer needs approval, just the space to be herself. We stood there, wrapped in silence that felt like stillness. No rings, no roses. Just one simple truth. This was the first time I'd ever been loved for who I was, not the shrunken version molded to fit someone else's expectations. There was a strange feeling I'd never known in nearly 40 years. Freedom from the hunger for family approval. It didn't come all at once, at one top. It didn't hit like a wave of emotion. It arrived quietly, like the final echo of a dream you've just let go. A few weeks after the wedding, with new clients secured, our global expansion plan in motion, I began to feel empty. Not in my work, but in that familiar question. Maybe now they'll be proud? Then one morning, while prepping a keynote for the Western Women in Leadership Summit, I paused and asked myself, why am I still trying to prove something to people who never cared to understand? That's when I realized I didn't need recognition anymore, because I finally saw myself clearly. Savannah Blake was not the girl good with computers, not the backup when Mason can't deliver. I was the founder of a tech system used by hundreds of businesses, providing jobs for over 70 people and, most importantly, a woman who no longer shrinks to fit someone else's mold. From that shift came Visible. The name came to me on a sleepless night, remembering what it felt like to be seated next to the kitchen at my brother's wedding. They wanted me invisible, but I stood up and became more visible than ever. Very visible, because women should not have to disappear to keep the peace. This mentorship program isn't just about business skills, it's a community, an emotional support network, a coalition for women pushing back against what I once lived, being dismissed in our families, excluded from the negotiation table, and told to tone it down so we wouldn't intimidate anyone. The first group had 12 women, from a college student whose brother drained her tuition fund to open a bar, to a single mom whose own mother froze her debit card, to manage money for the whole family. And that first session was one of the most emotional experiences of my life. When Ava, a software engineer from Santa Fe, shared that her husband had once forged a resignation letter on her behalf because you should be home with the kids, The room went still. Then it erupted, not in anger, but in recognition. For the first time, these women felt seen, and that's when I knew. Visible wasn't just a side project. It was legacy. One night, after finishing a panel in San Francisco and sitting with Ethan on the hotel balcony, he asked me something simple. Do you think you're becoming the woman you used to dream of being? I was quiet for a while before answering. No, I'm becoming the woman that little girl, forgotten at her fifth-grade award ceremony, would be proud of. And that is enough. Ethan held my hand and said nothing more. Later, I opened my laptop, logged into the Visible dashboard. Dozens of emails had come in that day, many from small towns, where female entrepreneur was still a rare phrase. One email made me freeze. Fennell Bradford. Subject: I was wrong, and I want to start again. Natalie's mother-in-law, the one who chuckled at the mention of my software at the wedding reception. Now she wanted to join Visible. I don't know if she's truly changed. But I know one thing for certain. Visible isn't for perfect people. It's for those willing to see themselves and choose to step into the light. I was in the conference room on the 38th floor of Clarion's headquarters, looking out over the golden skyline of downtown Denver, when the next email arrived. From Richard Ellington. Subject: an apology and a proposal to reopen negotiations. I wasn't surprised. I knew it would come sooner or later. More than 3 months had passed since I walked away from the wedding reception table and pulled the plug on the Ellington Properties contract. Since then, the market had shifted. Richard's company had lost 3 major partnerships, including Coastal Development and Titan Maritime, who ultimately reached out to Clarion. Internal rumors even hinted that Ellington's board was considering revoking Richard's direct control if he couldn't repair the relationship with me. The email was brief, professional, nearly a personal apology letter. Savannah, I write this not as a chairman, but as a father, one who watched his own child make a mistake and failed to correct it in time. I apologize for how my daughter treated you. More importantly, I apologize for not recognizing that you were the very foundation of the system we placed so much faith in. If you're willing, I'd like to meet in person to discuss the possibility of working together again, this time under terms entirely set by you. With respect and sincerity, Richard Ellington. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I got up, walked down the glass corridor of our office, and ran my hand over the nameplate that read, Savannah Blake, founder and CEO, like a quiet ritual to remind myself. Nothing I have was handed to me. I stepped up and claimed it. That evening, sitting on the porch with Ethan, once a space of solitude after long days of family disregard, now became the place where the most honest conversations began. Richard apologized, I said, handing Ethan my phone. He read the email quickly, then set it on the table. So, are you going to work with him again? I shook my head. Not now. And if I ever do, it'll be on entirely different terms. I won't return to anything that even remotely looks like the old way. Ethan nodded. Because next time, the negotiating table won't be something you ask to join. It'll be the one you build, and invite others to sit at if they're worthy. I looked at him, filled with a peace I once confused with parental approval. Now I knew. True freedom isn't about being loved the right way. It's about no longer needing it from places that never had it to give. The following week, I hosted a special call with the entire Visible network, now over 40 women across 12 states. During the meeting, I told them about Richard's email and why I hadn't replied. A young woman named Lori Tran, a Vietnamese-American engineer in Kansas, raised her hand. Do you plan to forgive them? Smiled, answering gently. Forgiveness isn't a duty, it's a choice. And right now, I choose peace over attaching myself to any emotion, including forgiveness. There was a soft round of applause, not for my defiance, but because we all understood what it means to walk out of the shadows of family expectations. A month later, I received an invitation to speak at the National Women in Leadership Forum in Seattle. I stood on that stage. Not to showcase achievements, but to share the moment I was seated near the kitchen. and how I rose from it. I didn't cancel a contract because of a seat, I said to nearly 800 people. I canceled it because I refused to accept less than what I deserve just to appear in the family photo. The room was silent. Then it erupted. And in that moment, I realized this story wasn't just mine anymore. I haven't replied to Richard's email. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But one thing I know for sure, if we ever sit at the same table again, it will be because I chose where that table gets built and who earns a seat. And if no one wants to play by the rules of respect, I won't hesitate to build another one. Not to rebel, but to remind everyone who's ever been pushed into the kitchen, they deserve to sit in the spotlight. Savannah's story is a powerful reminder that self-worth isn't defined by family approval or societal standards, but by our courage to stand up for ourselves. In a world that still favors outdated norms, women like Savannah show that you don't need permission to succeed or to be respected. Sometimes walking away from the wrong table is the first step to building a better one, where respect is the bare minimum. What do you think about Savannah's journey? Have you ever had to stand up for your own worth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring and heartfelt stories about family and resilience.